arguing all of the mechanics of the system, because the economists who are supporting this corrupt system, they're happy to argue the mechanics of economics with us forever. They don't mind that, as long as their patrons are running the system in the meantime. We realize that that is a tactic. And if you're arguing economics and mechanics, there's no end to it. If you phrase the system in terms of morality, what can they say? How can they say, oh yeah, we should have a system that concentrates almost 50% of the nation's wealth into 1% of the population? Yeah, they won't say that because it'll sound ridiculous, it'll be ridiculous, and it goes nowhere. In moral terms, this argument is everybody can understand that. And so this is an important talk that Bob is going to give today. Bob Poteat is one of the most knowledgeable people in America, in the world, on how monetary systems work. He studied it in detail. He does not accept the legendary approaches where the internet's great on the one hand, a lot of information available. On the other hand, a lot of wrong information's available too. And you have to be able to sort that out. And Bob knows how to do that. On the critical questions, he'll head into a law library to actually read the Federal Reserve Act. Nobody does that. He does. So here is one of the most knowledgeable people in the country, in the world, on monetary system mechanics. And instead of mechanics, he's talking about morality. Fine. Please welcome Bob Poteat.
Thank you, Stephen. I think he oversold me a little bit, but we'll give it a go. I came to monetary reform from a nagging cognitive dissonance between my very comfortable resident ideology and what I could see going on in front of my eyes. Now, I don't know why I didn't have the double-think capacity, as so many people do, to ignore what was in front of my eyes and remain comfortable with this fuzzy stuff that I'd been taught all my life. Now, my education was technical and engineering, so I'm comfortable with facts, math, and analysis. But human life is experienced with feelings and emotions. We cannot reduce human life to data. To try to do that is unscientific and ignores many of the human variables. Human well-being cannot be measured in dollar value. Facts, math, and analysis, the more you apply to our system, the more it actually becomes a moral issue. There is not any conflict there. Now, for full disclosure, I take forward that those myths follow, they're just 300 years behind. Now, a pope recognized that Galileo had been right all along, about 360 years after the fact of Galileo's persecution. Now, what Campbell did not take note of is that we do have our modern mythologies, and the premier one is capitalism, and is supported by the submyths of economics. Now, our modern mythology, capitalism, is a combination of business, industry, free market superstition, government, and financial chicanery. It is sometimes justified as social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, which is, in my opinion, romanticized cruelty. No human can survive childhood without support, nominally of a family. No baby, however fit, can survive without support. A family is also dependent upon society for support. We have become so dependent on industrial production, technological services, and governmental organization that we cannot survive without it. And this calls for an appropriate social, moral context that is commensurate with our science and our technology, the culture that we're living in. Millennia-old mythologies can't deal with it, and soundbite distortions of Darwin's theories have no place in a modern culture commensurate with the morality we need. We are not living in a jungle, but much of our behavior suggests that we have not left that paradigm far enough behind. Now, this is from a book, Demonic Males, written by Richard Wrangham and Dale Peterson. The problem is that males are demonic at unconscious and irrational levels. The motivation of a male chimpanzee who challenges another's rank is not that he foresees more matings or better food or longer life. Those rewards explain why sexual selection has favored the desire for power, but the immediate reason he vies is less subject to the areas of context. It is simply to dominate his peers. Unconscious of the evolutionary rationale that placed this prideful goal in his temperament, he devises strategies to achieve it that can sometimes be complex, original, and perhaps conscious. In the same way, the motivation of male chimpanzees on a border patrol is not to gain land or win females. The temperamental goal is to intimidate the opposition, to beat them to a pulp, to erode their ability to challenge. Winning has become an end in itself, and it seems the same with men. Now that fits right in with shock and awe, does it not? But what about the predations of corporations and financial operatives? I was told by a boss that business is a game and money is the score. The primary source of our social, political, and economic dysfunctions is financial chicanery and predation of humans by humans. Therefore, monetary reform is not just an academic or entertaining exercise. Monetary reform has strong implications for the future of humanity. It will determine the direction of human life going forward. Sustainable ecology, both hardware and social infrastructure, conviviality, political stability, social justice, legal justice, and amity depend on it. I consider monetary reform to be a moral imperative. When I say reform, I'm talking about the changes embodied in the American Monetary Act. There are other plausible sounding plans, such as money based on time, based on energy, local currencies on different bases, and no money. But the cultural leap to achieve them is impractical. You can't get there from here because they all leave the debt system in place. So I stick with reform that can be accomplished within the political, social, and legal framework that we have. And that will be tough enough, but it will enable a decent, sustainable future of peace, sufficiency, and security. So what is moral? Moral has to do with the distinctions between right and wrong conduct. What is considered right and wrong depends upon time and culture. In some culture, human sacrifice was considered right. We would consider it wrong, would we not? But do we? What the hell is war? What is malnutrition, an untreated treatable disease that has shortened lives? We have the technology and resources to correct these conditions. Science and technology have made it possible to feed, house, clothe, educate, and medically care for every human being. So where is the money? Going to hear this over and over. Our money is debt issued by bankers for private profit. We've been brainwashed to believe that credit is good. Debt is bad, but they're the same thing. You can't have one without the other. And you cannot borrow yourself out of debt. Our government has abandoned its constitutional power to coin money to private bankers who will issue money as debt at interest for private profit. They will manipulate the money supply to maximize profit without regard to national or human well-being. Is it moral for an elite majority to have this hegemonic power over all of society? You can bet that I say no. Why do we talk about democracy as if it actually existed? In this system, debt accumulates exponentially. This is the latest credit market debt published in the latest quarterly Federal Reserve Bulletin. Now, we pay the interest on all of that debt. Federal, state, and local interest we pay with taxes. Our own personal interest we pay directly. But corporate and financial debt we pay for in the hidden cost of everything we buy, every financial transaction. We are extorted on every monetary transaction we engage in. Our entire culture is living on a credit card. Debt supports our standard of living. And the way our transactional money is generated requires exponential growth. Now here's a real example of the extortion of bonded funding compared to a non-interest system provided by colleague Ken Bonsack, who's not here this year. The cost of the new waste system is $32.5 million. Financing it with bonds raised the price to $84.2 million when paid off in 30 years. What did the community get for the extra cost? Nothing. In fact, for the money it paid, it could have had $52 million more of new infrastructure. So is it proper then to question the morality of the existing debt paradigm? Of course, my point is just so. It is immoral. And I don't wish to overburden you with a redundant recitation of social, political, international, and financial dysfunctions, but I will review a few to emphasize the need for a moral consideration. How do we behave rightly? At the heart of social, legal justice, crime, and psychological degradation is the distribution of wealth. This slide is somewhat dated. It is from 2000, published in 2006. It is global wealth distribution by decile. The first decile has so little in it, it is given 0. 10% of the world population own nothing. Top 10%, 85.2% of the wealth, 5%, 70%, 1% of the population has 40% of the wealth. It was deplorable, but all the empirical indications are that it has grown worse. And it's even worse when you look at where the income is going. This shows where the wealthiest 1% resides. The United States, with less than 5% of the world's population, has 37% of the world's richest 1%. Japan has a fantastic 27%. Economics 101 appears to be right about one thing. There is no limit to human want, or should we call it greed. Or should we just call it power to dominate? What the disparity means in real societal terms is obscene wealth for a few and literal starvation and shortened life for many. It also implies political instability, resentment, and reaction. It breeds what can be classified as terrorism. Beyond any moral consideration, I have to ask why safety and security considerations do not demand a more equitable distribution. This is a deficit in infrastructure maintenance, as indicated by the American Society of Civil Engineers. You'll hear more about this from another presenter, but I cannot leave it out. 2 exclamation points. The I-35 West Bridge in Minneapolis, and the inundation and failure to repair New Orleans in a timely manner. Here we see huge lineups for free medical care. Medical care has been the big political hullabaloo of this summer. The centerpiece, 40 million or so people without insurance, another 40 million or so without adequate insurance. We should not even be talking about insurance. We should be talking about health care. We're the only industrialized nation without national health care. And we spend almost twice as much per capita as other nations, which implies we can do it for half and cover everybody. War. Trillions of dollars of war wasted on war. Almost half the federal budget is devoted to present, past, and ongoing cost of war. Lost lives, damaged infrastructure, and terror are part of the package. There's ecological damage that cannot be estimated. Dioxin, known as Agent Orange, a defoliant, is still causing birth defects and cancers in Vietnam. This kid learned to swing with his legs because he has deformed arms. And this is from an internationally supported school and hospital for victims of Agent Orange in Vietnam called Friendship Village. Thousands of tons of uranium munitions called depleted uranium have been exploded in the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, and dozens of test sites in the United States. Where the stuff has been used in war, birth defects and cancer rates have increased dramatically. This is one of the lesser offensive slides as an example. According to this source, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley invested in oil fields, pipelines, and tankers. Along with major oil companies, they opened Intercontinental Commodities Exchange, a completely unregulated commodities exchange after the passage of the Commodities Futures Modernization Act. They achieved virtual monopoly of supply and command of trading markets when volume on the Intercontinental Exchange, ICE, exceeded the New York Mercantile is when prices of oil began to rise, and this tipped off the current recession that we are in. Our educational system is one of the most expensive and least effective. Noam Chomsky once described it as a screening system to protect the privileged and only allow others in that adopted to the status quo. With proliferation, the chances of this terror weapon being used again are increasing. That was a brief outline of the need to make monetary reform a moral issue. We must discriminate between the right and wrong actions, behaviors, conduct that create these conditions. It's all about what we do. Now, there are morals that have been handed down for millennia that are as appropriate today as they ever have been. They are universal and timeless. They just need to be incorporated into our actions like they never have been yet. Murder, theft, rape, and lying we accept as immoral, we vigorously condemn and prosecute individual murder, and we should. However, collective murder called war only provokes a few whines of complaint by peace activists and feckless demonstrations. Others justify it, some revel in it. Shortened lives from pollution, malnutrition, and untreated diseases are noticed even less. Our institutions killed by the millions while we go about living our daily lives in denial. Take $50 from a liquor store with a pistol, and you know what happens. But we allow massive theft by privately issued credit used as money and the Wall Street predations. Neither of these activities creates anything of value to support society. In fact, they only produce price value, which is used to extract wealth from the community in exchange for nothing. Wall Street and credit money are immoral institutions, in my opinion, yet we accord near reverence for those who so achieve great wealth, we cede them power. An inquiry into the permanent causes of the decline and fall of powerful and wealthy nations, written by William Playfair and published in 1805, author of notes in continuation of an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations by Adam Smith. Playfair argued that the disparity of wealth caused degradation of morals and resentment that led to revolution. Playfair, as opposed to Smith, who merely wrote sophistic rhetoric, based decline and fall of powerful and wealthy nations on real research and data. He invented XY plotting and used that technique to demonstrate the rise and fall of wealthy and powerful nations. One of his graphs showed the exponential increase of interest cost with the founding of the Bank of England. Now, morals are made by society as needed. Humanity continues to struggle with the contradictions as thou shalt not kill while we make war. But C.H. Douglas said, peace is economic warfare between battles. Economic warfare may very well kill more people than battles. Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State of the United States, when asked about 500,000 Iraqi children dying because of sanctions placed on the state of Iraq, said it was worth it. She showed no remorse. Thou shalt not steal, but we legalized bank credit money and derivatives. An imperative of our debt-based capitalist system is growth. Growth is the capitalist mantra. The growth mantra compels the turning of natural resources into toxic waste in pursuit of something called an economy with no regard for long-term effects on social and organic well-being. It is a motive to empire to gain control of the resources. Only fools and some economists believe that there can be infinite growth in a finite world. In the disconnected world of economics based on prices of abstract financial instruments instead of real production for human support, there is no limit to growth because there is no limit to numbers. You just disconnect them and voila, infinite growth is possible. So, disconnection of real production for real things, for human life support and well-being from economic growth based on abstract price numbers suggest a mental pathology when spread as a meme becomes intellectual, social, and political pathology, and ultimately results in psychopathic behavior. Corporate behavior was examined in a book and video, The Corporation. The book and movie made note of 6 characteristics of psychopathic behavior common to corporations as legal persons. Callous unconcern for the feelings of others, incapacity to maintain enduring relationships, reckless disregard for the safety of others, deceitfulness, repeated lying and counting for others for profit, incapacity to experience guilt, and failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors. Of course, corporations are make-believe entities that do not act at all. Corporations cannot be psychopaths. Corporations have no sentience, mass, energy, or ability to reason. Corporate activity is activity of individual and groups of individual humans. It is humans that are responsible for the results of corporate activity. If you've worked for a corporation as I have, you know that the quarterly bottom line isn't everything, it's the only thing. That is the corporate ethic. It is amoral. This does not prevent corporate officers from articulating grand ideologies. Other characteristics of psychopathology, in addition to those previously mentioned, like lying, are, and these are forms of lying as far as I'm concerned, glibness, superficial charm, grandiose sense of self-worth, cunning, manipulative, emotionally shallow, failure to accept responsibility for own actions. Mafia dons, politicians, religious fanatics, corporate CEOs, and some economists share certain of those characteristics. I have yet to articulate the resulting behavior in a way that satisfies me, but when humans can put an ideology between themselves and their actions, there is no limit to what they will do. Religion, patriotism, political ideology, economic ideology, quarterly bottom line, capitalism, etc., provide the rationale to abdicate all morality and responsibility. War, crusades, witch hunts, genocide, bank credit, and capitalism all serve to replace morality with delusion and denial. Facts cannot prevail against what is effectively cultured ignorance. My laugh of 2008 was Mr. Greenspan squirming before a congressional committee with shock that his ideology was flawed. Why didn't you ask me, Alan? What rock did he crawl from under? Had he never heard of the historical bubbles? This is the South Sea, Mississippi, and my favorite, tulipomania. Was he blind to the concentration of wealth that was occurring? Had he never heard of the fall of the Roman Empire? Did he care about others? If he did, he didn't show it. Was he ignorant of the cyclical economic history of the United States? Mistaking growth of inflated GDP and other equally misleading numbers for national well-being is stupidity. Perhaps forgivable as innocent by reason of insanity. It is ignorance, unforgivable for one in his position. Did his ideology result in psychopathy? He cannot be attributed compassion. In first place, for my 2009 laugh of the year is this reference to Congressman Barney Franks concerning the moral deficiency of bankers. Mr. Frank appears to be a major roadblock to monetary reform. What a strange case of the pot calling the kettle black. Mr. Frank's major campaign contributions are financial institutions and insurance companies. Repair of New Orleans, infrastructure maintenance, universal health care, college education for everyone who wants it, clean environment, clean energy, end of poverty, And anything that is physically possible and socially acceptable can be done with properly administered monetary system as outlined in the American Monetary Act. With reduced internal and international tensions, we can achieve disarmament. We can rid the world of those weapons that have the ability to terminate all human life. And we start to do this, this is the start, by throwing off this debt yoke that have been put on us by exploitive financiers. This current economic downturn presents an opportunity to throw off the old paradigm that has universally failed to deliver its ideology. We can, with the adoption of an appropriate moral structure, take advantage of technology and science to dawn a new era of human existence. We can replace meaningless numbers of GDP with measures of true human and ecological well-being. So what kind of social order do we want? The social order that we have is out of order. Can we learn nothing from history and the facts in front of our eyes? Do we really think we can keep doing the same thing and get a different outcome? So what kind of social order do we want going forward? It is up to us. It is our moral choice. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, I answered all your questions. Speak up, Ed.
What are the steps you suggest we use to democratize what I call Wawa, which is the merger of Wall Street and Washington? Wawa is the merger. How do we democratize it? Give us a couple of steps.
Well, we need to democratize the monetary system. And I'm not against, private investment because it does offer initiative and creativity in advancing things. But it has to be brought back to that instead of the financial balloon that we have, where everything is put into these crazy financial investments that produce nothing. They just make very wealthy people who then buy our Congress. So we end up with this oligarchy, this is what we have. We don't have a democracy, it's an oligarchy. Does that help? No. Anybody else?
What do you think is the single biggest impediment to presenting this message to a wide spectrum of people?
The biggest impediment? Probably media, Congress, our educational system. Stephen Walsh has got a reference to what's being taught in high school. They're teaching kids in high school that the government is supposed to borrow money, and we have a great system. Ellen? Somebody's going to have to relay her question.
You mentioned the arithmetic concept, and I couldn't tell was that at a 2%
Can you
interest
hear?
rate? There's a P,
Okay.
and then there was a 7.
Sorry, Ellen, I can't hear you.
What was the interest rate on 10 concepts where the bond,
30-year.
yeah, the 30-year interest rate were $85,000 versus $33,000 when it was interest free? What was the interest rate on that slide?
7.5%.
It said 2%.
me talk to you afterwards so I can hear the questions. Okay. Anybody else?
Dave Kelly.
I really like your idea talking about we have an economic system of extraction by financiers and so on. Would you elaborate on that? Is extraction a strong enough word?
What do you suggest for a better word, Dave? That's David Kelly, their known, what's the word? Advisor to political people.
Oh, the word is theft. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we're waiting.
That works.
Carol?
Well, I really like what you said, and today I wore my favorite T-shirt, and maybe we should reprint this. It has the dollar and it says warning, use of this product may cause all those litany of horrors that you mentioned. And at the end it says, use at your own risk. So if we want to get our message out to a wider audience, maybe we should reprint some of these, just to be more visible, to reach the popular culture.
Very
This
good.
is awesome.
T-shirt showing time. I'd like to share mine as well. While you order that.
One thing I should mention, any of the speakers who will get their talk to me on either by email or on a disc, we will burn a disc with all these talks on them, which you can order for a very reasonable cost. And all you have to do on the order forms that we're going to pass out, just write in there, disc of speakers. It's not on there yet. Tommy, last question, because we're running behind.
Well, that is include their handouts too.
The disc can include anything that's printed, yeah.
But the stuff what they show.
We can try to do that too.
That can be done.
Can't be done if we get all the material. You take another question? He's all the way from England.
My question is do you think there's a slight danger of attaching every problem in the world to monetary reform? And when monetary reform occurs, aren't a lot of these issues still going to be there? And because sometimes when you attach too much, people find the message a little bit scary and a little bit overwhelming and a little bit disbelievable that all these things can be solved through one act. Do you think there's a danger of that at all?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. If we had monetary reform tonight, everything would be the same tomorrow. That's the starting point. But this was used to make a moral statement, and so I intentionally hit it hard. I think you are grown up enough to take it, and I trust that. Okay. People on the street, well, I've been watching their eyes glaze over for 30 years, so I hope I'm talking to a better group here. Yeah.
This is a moral issue. Shouldn't we tailor our message to the churches, bring it into the churches? Because particularly at this point, people are suffering in this country. The unemployment is going very high. People are looking for answers. And I think you might have a receptive audience. I mean, a non-denominational thing, but it is a deeply moral question going back to biblical times. We could tie in with that.
Like I said, I was a technician engineer, and that's what I did to get to where I am, to study the details and the technicalities. But you're right, we are failing to reach people on an emotional level. I agree with that, and that's what we have to do.